Top story, Britain has imposed immediate restrictions on travel from South Africa. This comes after another variant of COVID-19 was detected in cases in the UK. The British Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, says it's linked to South Africa, and anyone who has been in South Africa recently must quarantine immediately. Britain was already trying to curb the spread of a mutation of the virus, which is up to 70% more transmissible. Hancock says the new variant from South Africa differs from the one that was already prevalent in the UK.
This new variant is highly concerning because it is yet more transmissible and it appears to have mutated further than the new variant that's been discovered in the UK. We've taken the following action. First, we are quarantining cases and close contacts of cases found here in the UK. Second, we're placing immediate restrictions on travel from South Africa. And finally, and most importantly, anyone in the UK who has been in South Africa in the past fortnight, and anyone who is a close contact of someone who's been in South Africa in the last fortnight, must quarantine immediately.
Let's catch up quickly now with a South African living in the UK. Laura Jane Watkins is studying at the University of Birmingham. She joins us now via Zoom. Laura Jane, thank you very much for being with us. So I don't know if you saw there the UK announcing travel restrictions from South Africa. Would that affect you in any way at the moment?
Well, thank you so much for having me. And just so that I can share a bit of my experience. I don't have any current travel plans to go back to South Africa, and mainly for that very reason that COVID would just be quite inconvenient. And I think it's personally, it would be a bit irresponsible of me to travel to family. And I know, though, that it has directly affected many South African students here in the UK that have cancelled their current travel plans.
Yeah. Have you been in contact with anyone from South Africa, living in South Africa, who's come over to the UK in the past 2 weeks or so? That would mean, according to the government, you have to quarantine. Or have you just been mingling with people that you've been with for a longer time than that?
So because, I haven't actually been in contact with any other South Africans at the University of Birmingham. It has been quite strict. We have been living under Tier 3 restrictions just before and after the national lockdown, which was imposed in November. So I have been living quite a restrictive existence for since I arrived here in September. I was on a repatriation flight on the 28th of September. I was in isolation for 2 weeks. After that, I arrived in Birmingham, where I spent about 5 days of freedom at the university, and then I actually was identified through the NHS Track and Trace app. So I had to be tested, and I was back in isolation for 2 weeks. After which we went straight into a Tier 3 lockdown and then the national lockdown. So quite, I think just during this time, I've really not come into contact with many people other than my housemates at the moment.
Well, thanks for explaining. So the UK has this tier system. You're saying you're in Tier 3. Just tell us what daily life is like, what sort of restrictions you face.
So it's quite similar to the stages in South Africa, where we had the stage 3 restrictions. And so the current restrictions imposed, similarly, the gyms are open, which they wouldn't be under a Tier 4 restriction. The restaurants are not open for sit down. However, they are open for takeaways. They are also open for one other person. So you could go to a restaurant, request a takeaway with one other person, but you cannot be seen out with more than 6 people. So the rule of 6 is strictly in place, and you cannot be seen with members of different households. And there's really limited, I mean, other than if you're on public transport, you have to wear a mask, and you have to have a valid reason why you're on public transport. That's been quite difficult to travel to and from the tiers. However, there are a few exceptions. So as a student, I'm not as limited because I'd be allowed to travel for study purposes. Yeah. So in that sense, I am quite lucky. Some students have been able to go home for Christmas holidays, but due to the fact that they only announced the Tier 4 on Sunday and they gave students about 2 days notice, I don't think many students were able to get back to the university and have now found themselves stuck under the Tier 4, in Tier 4 locations.
Yeah. So you are at the University of Birmingham. Laura Jane, you're a foreigner surrounded by all these restrictions on your movement and things. Is it pretty lonely around this Christmas time? And I mean, are you able to study at least and get some work done? We know that it's been hard for students around the world.
Yes, I think for most people, I think we're really just trying to do what we can. And I think in terms of the British infrastructure, especially with NHS, there is at least mental health sort of help and that sort of support system. So that's been really reassuring, I must say, as a student here. And it's something, a lifeline that you can use. I'm fortunate enough to have great housemates at the moment, so we really just spend time with each other if we are feeling lonely, and I have that support system. But for many students, the sad reality is that they have not been able to go home for the holidays, especially as foreigners. And I know of some students that are actually stuck on campus in residences and have had to rely on the campus to provide them with a Christmas meal. So some universities have been doing that. They've been sending Christmas hampers to university students. But it is really, I think as a foreigner, you are particularly concerned with breaking any restrictions because you don't want you don't want your sort of record to reflect that you sort of crossed that line or that you violated any of the restrictions. I think at the end of the day, you just want to be as compliant as possible. Yeah. But I think having seen, especially on social media, having seen South Africans, in this sort of unrestricted, they're not as restricted currently. So it's been quite juxtaposed. My life living under these very severe restrictions, and then I've seen my friends and family sort of meeting up with each other, and I suppose that has been quite difficult. Yeah.
Well, more restrictions may be coming given the infection rate here in South Africa. That's why the UK closing travel from South Africa. Final question. I mean, it's great that you have great housemates. So, have you even met your sort of fellow classmates on your course, if you've only been there for 2.5, 3 months, sort of under regulations from the beginning, it sounds like?
So I haven't actually, which is it's quite a strange. It's this sort of a dystopian scenario that we're all living under, where we've started jobs and started university without actually physically meeting people or being in the actual buildings. So that has been quite a different experience. I haven't met many, or if any, of my fellow classmates. Yet to meet some of them. Perhaps I'll have that opportunity next year. But I think, if anything, I think it has definitely made us appreciate that, physical interaction and connections that we can have. And I hope that, people in South Africa are willing to be, compliant to the restrictions. Because I think in some areas here, at least here in the UK, you'll have certain areas, especially the working class areas, in Birmingham, for example, on public transport routes, people don't wear their masks. But then in other areas, such as Oxford, for example, people would be more compliant on public transport. So I think it often is dependent on the area.
All right, thank you so much. Interesting little snippet of life in Birmingham University in a house close by. That was Laura Jane Watkins, a South African studying in the UK. Thank you for your time tonight. Now.